What did you have for breakfast today?
I had a famous classic bagel with lox and cheese.
Oh, so good. Hey everybody, welcome to the Decoding Cocktails podcast. I'm your host, Chris LeBeau. At the ripe age of 38, I left my former career behind and joined the hospitality industry. Since then, I've been on a rapid journey of learning, meeting all sorts of great people, and this podcast is my chance to bring you along with me, whether I'm interviewing somebody that works in the industry, another enthusiast, or occasionally stepping back to share what I'm working on or my thoughts. I'm so glad you're here, and so with that aside, let's get into today's episode. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Decoding Cocktails. Just like every time, I am Chris LeBeau. Happy for you to be here today to dig into a topic that I am just beginning to kind of really get my hands around. My guest today is Hiromi Iuchi. She is the senior manager of the Overseas Operations Department for the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. She was born in the town of Hyogo, but lived in New York for 22 years, working for a sake and shochu import company and managing their sales. In 2015, she moved back to Japan, and in her current role, she is in charge of PR and management for their overseas projects. So the JSS, as it's sometimes known, is a nonprofit organization that consists of sake and shochu producers throughout Japan. And as of 2023, this June, the JSS is affiliated with 1,358 sake breweries and 267 shochu distilleries. And this falls under some 40-plus regional associations. So, we are going to talk today specifically about shochu, or even more particularly, honkaku shochu. Shochu is the original distillate that is native to Japan. And one of the things that makes this unique is there is a huge swath of ingredients that can be used, but the primary thing, so when you think about, there are vodkas, for example, or gins that are made from grapes or grains, etc. The base ingredient at times can vary a little bit. Shochu is very similar in that you can use things like black sugar, you can use things like sweet potato, rice, buckwheat, and wheat. So there are a number of subcategories that fall underneath that, but these are some of the big primary things that can be used. So what we need to know about this, and we'll get into this in the conversation, there'll also be a number of supplements to help you kind of navigate today's conversation, is one of the things that makes this very more flavorful as a product is that it undergoes typically when it's honkaku, and honkaku means authentic. So there are shochus out there that are distilled multiple times. The more times you distill something, the higher the proof goes, but the more flavor gets pulled out. So honkaku shochu is a single run distillate, tends to be very flavorful. The proofing can get up to what we see in a traditional spirit in the 40 percentages, but it's never going to get any higher than that. It's not allowed to. And most of the time, this is drunk with a little bit of ice, club soda, warm water. It's really often consumed with meals. And so it's often drank in a fairly neutral format so you can really experience it, and the proof is lowered quite a bit. Something I discussed in a previous podcast could always be worth going to listen to as well with sake sommelier Andrew Lamb. Hiromi will also help us kind of dig into what koji is a little bit. Koji is a mold that really helps kind of convert starch into sugar and is very unique and very commonly used in a lot of East Asian practices around various fermentations. Distillation has existed in Japan for quite a while. We know that it arrived on the island of Okinawa by 1477 and slowly began to spread its way up. But what we're also going to talk about is that while there are rices used in the growing of this, shochu primarily comes from, and for a long time was considered kind of In a way, I guess I feel like I reference moonshine often, but I guess it seems like for a long time this was really solely a drink. So shochu is pretty much made in the southern part of Japan, and for a long time that's where it resided. So think about whatever local beverage or cuisine that is fairly isolated or was isolated to a place, and for a long time, really kind of until I think, as she said, and I've kind of read elsewhere, the 70s or the 80s, there wasn't really a lot of interest in shochu, and about 99% of it is consumed in the country. And so if you haven't heard about it before or really haven't tasted much, it's because most of it is not making it outside of the borders. But people like Hiromi are now working to kind of raise awareness about this product. The flavor sets you can encounter are just so wide and varied. And of course, Japanese distillers bring their commitment to craft and excellence to this, so it's a super high quality product. Was a wonderful chance to dig into this with her. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation, and we'll be sure to link out to some other resources as well, should you want to go deeper. Again, I will link to the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association website. You can find them on Instagram at JSS_Shochu. You spell Shochu SHOCHU. Again, that link will be there along with a link to their website. But please enjoy this conversation with Hiromi Iuchi. Well, Iuchi-san, thank you so much for taking time to talk today. I'm very, very grateful.
My pleasure. I am very excited
Good.
to be interviewed.
A place I would be interested just to start in general is, do you have an early memory of shochu, perhaps either as an adult or maybe growing up and seeing it as a child, like knowing that it is so deeply steeped in Japanese culture? What's your earliest memory of it?
Shochu is always something that you drink with some kind of like a syrup or something. When I was like high school or college, that wasn't a big drink to maybe northern part of Japan. It's shochu is usually drunk in the southern part of Japan, which is the Kyushu Islands area where the production is from. So me growing up in the west side of Japan, near the Osaka, Kobe area, I didn't really, I wasn't really used to seeing it that much. We had a sake, which my father, my grandfather, everybody was drinking, I remember, but not the shochu in my area. So that's very interesting about the shochu.
Yeah, so one of the things I was grateful for yesterday, I got to have the nice tasting tour and talk through at your booth. And one of the things that was pointed out was overall, at least when we think about North America, the northern part of Japan has a climate similar more to maybe to Canada.
Right.
But when you get down to a part like Kyushu, we're kind of more like Florida, so much warmer.
Yes.
And so, if I think I remember correctly, with with rice not maybe growing as well in a climate like that is part of what leads to sake being more prevalent in other parts of the country and shochu being more prevalent in the south. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. That's one of the aspects as well. And also we can say sake making, it has been cultivated in Japan for rather longer time ago. It says like more than 1,000, about like 2,000 years that it's in Japan. That's what the book said. And shochu is more later on. Probably it's we could say about 500 years ago.
500.
So history-wise, the sake has been in Japan much longer than the shochu.
And so, so sake is, what have I heard? It is brewed like beer, but some people say, but often like more like drank like wine. And was because distillation is not as old of a technology in general as fermentation.
Right.
So the ingredients that are currently being distilled into shochu, were they ever being just fermented more into a beer or a wine, or did they make the immediate jump to being distilled? Or, and if you don't know, it's not a,
No, that's a great point, that what the shochu is unique compared with the other distilled spirits. Both shochu and sake, they ferment the grain. Sake is rice, and then it's koji. They both use the koji. It's a kind of a mold. It's grown in Japan, and very special mold that it's used for making soy sauce or miso or any fermenting Japanese food and products. Yeah, and then so sake and shochu, they both use the koji. So in order to be called a shochu, the koji has to be used. And sake is only fermentation. So what the koji does is the starch, which the rice has. They don't. Rice doesn't have sugar, right?
Right.
So starch is converted into sugar by koji. So koji works as an enzyme and break down the starch molecules and then turn it into the sugar.
Okay.
By koji. Then the yeast comes in, eat the sugar, and produce the alcohol.
Got it.
That's the unique fermentation method in production of sake. And then the same thing is, same technique is used for the shochu, but after the fermentation of the rice, and they distilled. So sake is only fermented alcohol beverage, and shochu is the distilled, fermented and distilled.
Right.
So that's totally different products.
And so I know that, so again, sake might again have a proofing similar to that of wine, or maybe a little above that. And shochu, I think I saw that like the range can go up to roughly what is 45%.
Right.
But a lot of it is also still a lower proof because it's only single distilled, so its flavor is richer. But so a lot of shochu is more around 25% or so. So it's not going to always punch as hard as a lot of traditional spirits.
Right. Shochu is, like you said, it's usually distilled once, most of the time only once. But sometimes very few distiller does it twice. But 99% of the producer does it only once. So by this, pot still just only once, it goes up to 43, 45, around there, and that's the maximum that it goes up, the alcohol-wise. And then usually they add the water and then bring it down to 25. And one of the reasons that 25% of ABV is popular in Japan as a honkaku shochu is because the shochu is usually consumed with the meal. They sometimes add the hot water, sometimes add water or on the rocks, so they dilute it to enjoy it with during a meal. That's one aspect that it's unique about the shochu compared with the other distilled spirits.
That was certainly one thing that I feel like has been driven home, is that especially in cocktail culture, sometimes we can think of these drinks. You can have a martini or a Manhattan with dinner, but oftentimes it's more of a light snack, if anything.
Right.
But yeah, in Japanese culture and in Italian culture, food is so much more commonly consumed at the same time as these things right here.
Right. So like I said earlier, the honkaku shochu is consumed mostly the southern part of Japan. So when they meant the alcohol is the shochu. Sake is, we call it sake like a regular term as an alcohol beverage.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Japanese sake, the rice fermented alcohol, it's been called sake outside of Japan and also in Japan, but it's nihonshu,
Right.
like a right term of
Because
sake.
if you are in an izakaya
Yeah.
in Japan
Right.
and you just ask for a sake
Yeah.
without any clarification,
Right.
a beer could arrive or
Right.
all sorts. So sake, to us is this specific product, but in Japan it is more of a general.
General alcohol, yes,
Right.
alcohol beverage.
Yes.
And they will say like, let's go drink sake. That means let's go drink alcohol.
Yeah.
And then like once you sat down at izakaya or the restaurant, and then they will ask.
But what do you really want?
Yes. And then you say beer or shochu or nihonshu.
Nihonshu. So one of the things that is, I know that there's a couple of dominant ingredients, but one of the things that makes shochu so diverse
Yeah.
is the fact that the number of ingredients. What is
Yes.
it? Is 53? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
And so I know there's a number of common ones, but talk us through some of the common ingredients used to make shochu, and we'll talk about the styles a little
I
bit.
think that I heard the quantity-wise, barley shochu is the most used.
Okay.
Quantity-wise, and then sweet potato, and then rice, and there's one. It's very significant products or ingredient that they use for the making shochu is the brown sugar.
Brown sugar. That's
Right.
right. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, brown sugar is a very interesting ingredient to use the shochu. But the brown sugar shochu is only made in Amami Islands. Amami Islands. It's a little bit off the Kagoshima prefecture.
Okay.
So there, the Kokuto shochu, which is the brown sugar shochu, is very historically popular and production-wise.
And I think one of the things that maybe people listening can relate to a little bit, because I saw that there's a map, and I'll link out to it, that in a way that we think of in this part of the country, that most of our rice is either grown in California or in Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so on your map, it clearly shows like, hey, this is the region that predominantly produces sweet potato or barley, probably because the climate is even more hospitable or the land has been set up for that. And so
Right.
some of these things are also quite regional too.
Yes. Kagoshima, for example, they have a volcano. It's called Sakurajima, and they had a big volcano island, area that has like a lot of ash, and it's hard to grow the rice, and sweet potato is the easy, very suitable for growing in that area. So using the sweet potato to make their everyday life alcohol drink is become very popular, I think.
Yeah, and in the same way that we think about perhaps with wine grapes, and I also remember in a talk I heard you give recently as well, that there certainly is there's some analogies you're trying to make to mezcal and to the agave world right now, where terroir, the soil that you plant a sweet potato in is very much, or what it's planted near, is very much going to impact its ultimate flavor that it can bring to the shochu.
Right, that's correct. I think terroir is, if you dig into alcohol industry or alcohol beverage, that as much more you studied, you ended up studying about the local weather and products and climate and all that, and then also water. Water is very important key. How the products is taste like, and I think in Japan it rains a lot, and we have very very nice quality water, very soft water, And so that's very good for making sake and as well as shochu.
I was talking with a sake sommelier, and he was talking about that in one of the big brewing districts,
Yeah.
that the water at the top of the street versus at the bottom of the street can end up presenting very different. And
Right.
so all of these things
Yes.
can end up making big decisions. So yesterday, one of the things I was lucky to try. So my understanding is that there are 3 types of koji. So there's the black, yellow, and the white.
Yeah.
And that overall, I think was it Ichihara-san? Was that
Ichihara-san?
Ichihara-san, who I spoke with, said that the yellow koji is most often used for sake.
Yes.
And the black, and so it was interesting to taste a sweet potato shochu with a white koji versus a black.
Yes.
So if we had exactly the same sweet potatoes,
Yes.
but in this one we're going to use a white koji
Yeah.
versus this one a black, do you mind? And clearly the distiller is going to have a lot of choices they can make, but do you mind telling us how is the white versus the black going to present different?
My personal opinions, I think the black koji, if you use a black koji to make a shochu, that's more bold and strong and rich and deep in the flavor. It's very kind of like manly,
Sure.
manly or stronger
Sure.
Image. And then versus to white koji used shochu is more soft and light and smoother and maybe like thinner image versus to like kind of stronger. Yeah.
I will say the barley shochu in particular comes to mind when I tasted the white koji. It made me think about when I was much younger. I tried making beer at home for a while, and that was fun. But I can so have tasted the grain in the white koji shochu.
Yeah.
But in the black one,
Yeah.
it was still very pleasant. It was nice, but the flavor was more aggressive.
Right.
So the barley, I felt, kind of got pushed into the background a little bit by the boldness of the spirit at that point in time.
You probably, I can relate to your impression. Maybe barley, a lot of cases they use the white koji. Sometimes they use the black koji to have like a different aspect, different type of flavor. But I think using white koji for the barley shochu is very popular.
Yeah. So one of the things that's obviously a big topic of conversation for your organization right now is that shochu is still relatively, especially compared to sake, unknown
Right.
outside of Japan. So
Yes.
most of it is consumed in the country.
Yes.
I think I saw, again, from your numbers from a presentation, there's roughly maybe 270 distillers between that and like Awamori, which is its cousin from Okinawa.
Right.
So talk to us about the state of the shochu industry and maybe some of the things. You're obviously here at Bar Convent Brooklyn working to raise awareness with bartenders and whatnot. So tell us why you want to get the word out more, because for a long time it seems like the Japanese people have been like, we're very happy to drink this on our own.
Yes, it's an interesting point aspect about the shochu. Like I said earlier, like when I was younger, probably like 30 years ago, the shochu was mostly consumed the southern part of Japan. And then probably like 1998, something like that.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, the sweet potato shochu was very popular. Became very popular in Japan, and then so everybody started noticing about the honkaku shochu, authentic shochu, and then the sweet potato shochu was becoming very popular, and then it kind of stayed and then spread it to the all over Japan, I think. Now, shochu is consumption of shochu and sake is 50-50, which is very interesting. And most of Japanese people are not really, keen on that, like 50-50%. But and then also people outside of Japan don't know. It's a news to them that because the shochu is unknown
Right.
outside of Japan, most of the cases. So when I say that to people outside of Japan, they are very surprised.
Right. Yeah, I think it was interesting to see again a trend line, and we'll be sure to link out to this presentation and some other information that has been shared with me, so you guys can see the visuals. But so over the past 50 years or however many, the consumption of sake has shrunk notably.
Yes.
While shochu is kind of roughly steady at this point in time, right here.
I think, so sake, like over 50 years, you said last 50 years, the consumption of Japan, which is the nearly same as the production of Japan, I mean, production of the sake, it decreased to maybe down to 25%.
Right.
1/4.
Wow. Yeah.
And then also the number of the producers, number of breweries went down to 1/4.
Okay.
So it's really decreased. And then, but on the other hand, shochu is, it's recognized by the consumers in Japan, so it was increased little by little. And now it's meeting point, 50-50. Just last year or a year before that.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see. And so, I think for many of us, if we've had a Japanese beverage, it's been sake. And so, to hear, but it's interesting to the drop off in demand. And I don't know if you've been able to track as to why. I was just talking with the ambassador for Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey, and he was explaining to me that despite like the reputation of the stereotype we impose upon Ireland, or we can impose upon Ireland, that overall consumption there is down like 30%. And so some people are also just drinking less because
I think so. Same problem with I heard it's French wine. Maybe younger people are not drinking a French wine
as
much as before. Before, like everybody every day,
right?
People are drinking wine, but not so much anymore. Right? They have more choices, or the preference is onto distilled spirits or something else. Same thing happened, I think, in Japan, like maybe 40 years ago or something. Beer became very popular, and then also wine was very popular, and whiskey. There are so many choices, and that trend went for that. So, and then also sake was consumed mainly with like grandpa or father, grandpa, and they are like drinking a lot and getting drunk and all that, bad image about the sake.
Sure.
And especially like sometimes after World War II, there's not so much sake, and so they did. I was told that maybe they add a little bit of like distilled alcohol in it, or like make it like a very cheap, drink, and then so when you drink it, the hangover next day is very severe or something like that. So that image is sticked around for a while.
Yeah.
Right now, it's people started noticing the quality of the sake is really improved and then changed and being recognized among younger people now. But like those like 30 years or 40 years, a lot of like bad image. Then at the same time, the wine and other trendy, fashionable drink coming into the market.
Right.
So they lost a lot of market. And before that, big national brands they can't produce enough to meet the consumption. So they buy sake from like a very small breweries around in the area, and then so the small breweries sell their sake to the bigger company, and then they'll brand it, and then they you know what I mean. So, but because of the consumption is went down, decreasing, and then they don't need to buy it anymore because of the consumption is getting lower. So like those small breweries has to give up the business.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons that it used to be 4,000 sake breweries in Japan, but now it's about 1,400. So that's one reason.
Yeah. And I think about, whether it's American culture, I've heard like people say in Italy, for example, that people might be drinking less, but also they're just drinking less Campari and other Italian bitters. They're like, I want Jack Daniels, or I want Old Forester bourbon.
Right.
Here in America, maybe we're drinking less beer, but we're drinking more tequila, more mezcal, and so it's fashionable.
Yeah.
And these things are also, of course, very delicious too.
I heard in United States, you used to have many small craft breweries in the U.S. but then bigger company like Budweiser or they kind of started becoming very big.
Yes.
And so those smaller breweries are kind of quitting, and then. But nowadays, probably 10 years ago, the craft beer brewing is coming back.
Yes, right.
So it's the trend of the.
These things can be very, very
the
cyclical.
The market is very influenced by what's going on in trend or preferences.
Yeah, I know you brought a couple of numbers to share, so I want to leave room for that, but. Yeah. I'd be interested for someone listening right now.
Yeah.
The amount and variety of shochu in the U.S. market isn't necessarily huge yet. In some markets, maybe like New York, you have a great, shop that will have availability. But if someone's going to begin thinking about buying a bottle of shochu, do you have any advice? One, it seems like we should be drinking this on the rocks or with some water or some club soda. But any suggestions on how to begin making a decision about making a purchase and what to do with something that they buy?
Right. There's so many variety of shochu in flavor wise. If you like lighter style, maybe you buy something like 25% or less, and then also barley and maybe white koji used, or there's one production difference, making differences that we haven't really touched yet, but vacuum distillation, and then normal pressure distillation.
So, right. Yeah. So atmospheric vacuum versus like a vacuum, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because and did you also say buckwheat as well? Is that what it was, or are you saying no vacuum? Vacuum and atmospheric. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
So vacuum one, the outcome is very light and smooth and kind of flavorful, like maybe flowery or something, and then versus to the normal, normal pressure one is more strong, rich and deep, and so. But there's like so many choices of combinations,
right?
How it's made. So if you use like the lighter style, then maybe vacuum pressure, and then also white koji used,
right?
Versus to if you like stronger, richer, more powerful, bold flavor, then you might want to go with like black koji and normal pressure combination. Right,
because I remember as well that people keep using this term, something I associate a lot with like Jamaican rum, is people talk about that especially sweet potato can be kind of funky or whatever.
Right, yes.
Yeah, so for people out there that are maybe thinking about hey, like, yeah, you don't like your spirits really turned all the way up. So a white koji that is perhaps used with like a barley and is done in a vacuum are going to be the softer kinds versus black koji, sweet potato at normal pressure that you're going to have like a much bigger punch right there. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. In the U.S., and this could be where we've talked about perhaps other conversations can be had with mixologists. So beyond hot water and other basic, are there very simple cocktails you've seen that think in terms of someone now has this bottle at home? Beyond a hot water or whatever, are there other basic ingredients you would suggest people having on hand?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of like cultural. We've been in, consumers in Japan. They normal way to enjoy this shochu is like on the rocks or with water, diluted with water, or the hot water, or recently soda, and then highball, shochu highball.
Shochu highball, yes.
That became very popular. And then sometimes they use the oolong tea or green tea to dilute the shochu with, and also put the salted umeboshi, like salted plums.
Salted plum. Okay, yes.
Yeah, that was very popular. But
because the flavors are so masterfully crafted, so delicate and interesting. And I'm sure there could be mixologists out there that are doing very ornate things.
Yes.
But, diluting it a little bit, maybe sweetening a touch just to kind of tone the shochu down a little bit. But we don't want it to hide in the background because the flavors are going to be so wonderful.
There's like a very interesting sweetness in shochu compared with the other column distilled alcohol spirits like vodka and other gin. Compared with the column still distillation spirits versus to the pot distillation like Scotch or
rum or Jamaican rum. Yeah, exactly.
Or the shochu, honkaku shochu. It has like a nice balance or nice subtle sweetness. So maybe you don't. Maybe people are not like thought of like, doing anything, and rather than adding anything, they wanted to kind of enjoy the flavor. So that was the history of the consumption of the honkaku shochu in Japan. Maybe we hope that it would spread to the other market outside of Japan to enjoy the shochu that way. But then as an association, we have to promote not necessarily promote, but like we have to spread the education of the shochu, what the honkaku shochu is. So in order to introduce the sake to the market, and which is this honkaku shochu being a distilled spirit, which is not known at all either. So we decided to bring the honkaku shochu into the distilled spirits industry.
Right.
So in order to introduce the new item to the industry, we thought that maybe using in a cocktail will be something interesting or catch everybody's attention.
It is. Mixologists certainly were, as you said in the presentation I saw you give. They certainly were the gateway to mezcal in this country, and so I think people are keen on them right now, and to bartenders and mixologists that are listening, one, you can certainly look this up, but if you need to get put in contact with somebody that knows, reach out to me, and I'm happy to do that as well. Iuchi-san, I think we've covered a lot of wonderful ground. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today that we haven't covered yet? And there's no pressure. I just want to make sure.
Okay, I have my experience in alcohol industry is started late 90s, and I started introducing the premium sake to the United States, especially in New York area. Then that's how I get into the alcohol beverage industry. Then the education was the key, but at the same time to introduce this something unknown drink to the market, you have to introduce it with the background, the
Yes.
cultural background.
Yes.
And I think the Japanese sake and the Honkaku Shochu, it both have a long history
Yeah.
and deep cultural background. So introducing the Honkaku Shochu, just like a mezcal, I think cultural background and the customs or people's nature and terroir and everything need to be recognized and appreciated at the same time. And that's what we are trying to emphasize, and that's what we're trying to promote.
Yeah.
And it would take some time, but hopefully people are interested in, and then that interest is travel to the producers in Japan,
Right.
and then they would be very appreciative to do a everyday effort and work of making such a drinks or such a products. And sorry to make it like longer.
No, this is great. Keep
Longer
going.
statement, but Japanese sake and the Honkaku Shochu industry, it's a family business most of the cases, and so some of the Japanese sake brewery have like 300 years history of like family business.
Wow.
And shochu probably like 100, 150, 200 history like of family business. So usually they pass it down to the
Next
generation in the family, and that's like really great treasure for Japan and then to the world. And so I want to keep that culture still, surviving in this industry and being recognized. And then we want to keep it alive.
Yeah.
I want to keep it alive. So that's one thing that I really hope, and I am very. I have the great privilege to do this job. But very hard to keep the family business that long.
Yes. Yeah.
So introducing a Honkaku Shochu to the world market, it would excite the next generations, and then the next generations. So that's how we can keep the business alive.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, I think that, as we witness the rise of the craft spirits movement globally,
Mm-hmm.
but even for those listening in the U.S. as they think about their work, many of these brands are made great quality and even with great thought to where these things have come from.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the romance that has appeared around mezcal
Mm-hmm.
has been the idea that this has been made in this village in this way for this long.
Yes.
And for those hungry for the next thing like that,
Yeah.
The next old thing.
Yes. Could be the new thing.
Yeah, if you're ready for the new old thing, Shochu is going to offer that same level of diversity because, I think, it's fair to say one thing that Japanese are renowned for is their commitment to craft. And so to see that a family that distills a sweet potato shochu with black koji this way might not at all look the same way that the people, 2 towns over are making it. And so to your point, like we've discovered with mezcal and raicilla and all these things, that diversity awaits us for those that want to go chase it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
This is wonderful. Thank you for taking the time today. We'll be sure to link out to the Japanese Society of Sake and Shochu Makers. Anything else you'd care to share today?
Maybe the way that we're introducing the shochu to the distilled spirits industry this way, as a one of the way to introduce is to use the shochu to the cocktail, apply to the cocktail making, which is really interesting and exciting, and all my producers are very excited about that as well, and to open up their eyes or their mind. So, but then once that you discover the hongaku shochu and what it is, and maybe want them to try in a traditional way of enjoyment, enjoying the shochu, like during a meal, and maybe with a hot water, or please find your way to enjoy that, wonderful spirits.
I do think you've hit on something that is important, that I think one of the problems the cocktail faces at times is that it feels like I need to find these 5 ingredients and now a not simple process to build this, and I'll do it later. Versus to get some hot water, some ice, whatever, and pour, and you're done. Is certainly a very simple thing in terms of when you buy a bottle, you're not necessarily buying a project. You are buying something that is very readily able to be consumed, which makes it easier in terms of, I'm just going to buy this bottle and then I'm never going to use this. I know how this goes. So,
right.
Yeah.
And then so the shochu has been consumed by Japanese people like not the wine, but like during a meal drink. So it pairs very well with the food, and any kinds of food. Cheese, pizza, I tried it with a pizza. It was really good. And it's very nice next day too. There's no hangover unless that you finish like 3 bottles. So my goal might be the people knows about the honkaku shochu, and then they would enjoy the shochu just as an everyday, easy, drink.
Wonderful. Iuchi-san, thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. The show notes for today's episode are available at decodingcocktails.com/podcast. If you'd like to keep up with what we're working on, there are 2 great ways to do so. One, our short weekly newsletter, Cocktail Confidential, which you can sign up for at decodingcocktails.com/newsletter. Or give us a follow on Instagram at Decoding Cocktails. If you think this podcast is great stuff, we'd love it if you'd subscribe or, of course, share an episode with a friend. The Decoding Cocktails podcast is produced by Chris Bay and myself. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon, and happy cocktails.